So we're talking about different skill development strategies, and today it's going to be getting started with using stroke counts. So we have times that we can use stopwatch, pace clock to objectively measure speed, and that's really helpful at steering swimmers towards more effective solutions. However, we have no objective and most importantly practical way to measure technique or efficiency. The appropriate tech isn't available to everyone, and the tech also isn't necessarily real time. You have to see what the results are sometimes later within a practice or even after practice when it's not super useful for creating change in the moment. Relying purely on time doesn't necessarily work because swimmers can cheat it. So if they're swimming 2100s on 115, they can swim with relatively poor skills and still accomplish that. And they can use skills that aren't necessarily going to help them swim really fast at the end of the year or in a meet, whenever that might be. And then the slower the speed, the more that's true. So the slower the speed, there's a lot of different ways that problem can be solved. And then when the speeds are going faster, there's fewer problems that can be solved, so it becomes harder to cheat it. Of course, we don't spend most of our time swimming really, really fast, so we want to try to avoid swimmers using less effective options for accomplishing the goals of a set. The other thing that doesn't necessarily work is focusing purely on how strokes feel. And so if they feel good, we assume that that's good. And however, the problem is the body is pretty misleading. What feels good isn't necessarily always good. And if that was the case, swimmers would naturally gravitate towards the best skills. And if you've been at practice recently, you know that that's not the case. The other thing is swimmers tend to believe what they want to believe, and they always want to believe that what's comfortable and what they're used to is what's most effective. And again, that tends to not be the case, or else we'd all be coaching really, 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 really fast swimmers, and all of them would be really, really, really fast. So the strategy is count strokes. I understand it's not perfect, but it does provide useful information. And that information becomes much more useful when it's used in combination with times. And so there are a lot of ways to reduce stroke counts. However, there are less ways to reduce stroke counts and still swim fast. And that's what's important, as using them in combination can be really effective at helping swimmers improve. What I really like about it is it provides instant feedback, and swimmers can use that feedback to change. And that instant feedback is really valuable because it lets people know if something has changed. So if a swimmer has been swimming a series of 100s and they started out taking 15 strokes and now they're taking 18 strokes, something has changed, and it's probably changed for the worse. And so both the coach and the swimmer are now aware that they need to do something differently in order to mitigate that change, mitigate that increase in stroke count. It also lets coaches and swimmers know how a performance was achieved. And so if someone swims a 30-second 50 breaststroke, but they took 12 strokes per lap versus a typical 8 strokes per lap, everyone knows that there was probably a lot of spinning going on, and that's probably not the best way to improve over the long term. So it provides additional information about how a performance was achieved, and that can be useful for determining what, if anything, needs to change on subsequent repetitions. The other thing that's really valuable is that once swimmers have established it as a habit, it tends to self-correct. And so if they're aware that things have changed, they tend to do something about it automatically as opposed to just letting it go. Likewise, when people start swimming slower than they would prefer or slower than they're used to, they tend to start to do something about it. And stroke counts can work the same way. Instead of just focusing on time, it allows them to focus on how long they're staying as they swim. And it gives them an opportunity to coach themselves because they have the information, and then they can do something about it. So when getting started with stroke counts, the first thing to do is just do it. You don't need fancy sets. Those can come later once swimmers have a habit of counting their strokes and being aware of what their stroke count typically is for a given situation. And so the first thing is to just establish a habit. And what you can do is constantly ask them what their stroke counts are. Sooner or later, they're going to figure out that they better have an answer, and the only way to have an answer is to actually count their strokes. Especially in the beginning, whatever they tell you, you don't have to judge. And so if you think their stroke count should be 12 and it's 15, you just say, cool, it's not time yet to start worrying about what those specific numbers are. This might feel like it's not accomplishing much at first. However, it's an investment in creating a skill and a habit that can be really useful later on in the training process. So here are 3 different sets that are pretty straightforward and pretty simple to start with. The first version is just an aerobic set where they just need to know their stroke count. And so in this set, you're just constantly asking, how many was that? How many was that? How many was that? How many was that? The second version, they're actually trying to change it a little bit, and so just seeing what happens. And so again, if they're not able to do it, it's not a big deal. You're just trying to create some awareness that they have the power to change these numbers. Because most swimmers are familiar with gliding and breaststroke, it's usually pretty easy for them to create change in a set like this. Freestyle for some can be a little bit harder because they're very comfortable in a certain rhythm and they have a hard time changing that rhythm. In this set, they're going to take one less stroke per 25 within each 75. So each 75 might be like 18, 17, 16. And again, they're just trying to create a change each time. And all you're doing is asking them what their stroke count was and just telling them to try again if they can't get it. And if they get it, regardless of what the stroke counts are, give them a thumbs up. So a simple way to get started with stroke counts. If you have any particular interesting ways that you find stroke counts to be effective, or any challenges that you have with stroke counts, or any sets that you think are really cool using stroke counts, definitely send them my way. I'd love to hear it. And if you have any questions about stroke counts or anything else, definitely let me know.